Hello, everybody. I am delighted to be here. Let me get my camera a little bit set a little bit better. It's so nice to be here with you. It's been a little while since I've been live, and I just wanted to check in with all of you and see how things are going and to share a little tip today with you. Um, I know that this time has just been crazy for parents who are finding themselves home with their kids, either, all these scenarios. If your kids are younger and they were not even in school yet, maybe you were working outside the house and now you're trying to get, your work done from home while you've got little ones running around. Or maybe you were already a home-based parent. I hate the term stay at home, by the way. So I use the term home-based. Maybe you were already a home-based parent, but now you're not able to get out and have those play dates or get out to the playground. Here in California, they just sort of semi-opened the beaches, so a little bit more freedom, but it's not quite that feeling of like, let's get out and, take on the world or whatever. Maybe that wasn't even your reality to begin with. Maybe your kids were sick, not with corona, but just with something else. Maybe your school age kids are now home. Maybe you've got little ones who are being told that they're supposed to be learning online, and you are trying to get your work done, whatever your work is. And whether that's making food or making, transactions happen, or making big business decisions from home, and you've got your children asking for help, or you've got to sit next to them and monitor them and homeschooling. And I think the only people who are like well prepared for this are people who were already homeschooling, who are like, yeah, but now we just can't have, the play dates. And that's hard for them too, don't get me wrong. But most of us were not homeschooling before. And I'll tell you, I have a 12 and a 14-year-old, and just even having them around, as far as my concentration goes, it can be very distracting, right? And I don't know about you, but there's definitely like a guilt thing for me that happens. Like, I should be taking advantage of this time. This is so unusual, but at the same time, I need to get work done and trying to get things done. I don't want to keep shooing them off. I want to make the most of our time together. But man, finding the balance is really, really hard. And so I hope that you guys were able to see, just say hi as you arrive. I see people coming, and I'm really curious always who's here, and just say a quick hello if you wouldn't mind. And also if you could just like give me a thumbs up or a heart or even a mad or whatever kind of emoji reaction you can give me as I'm talking, if it's resonating or not resonating with you, I would really appreciate that. So I'm not just like here, talking in a box by myself. Your feedback really, really helps me. Um, so I know that it's really hard for people to find balance right now. And I spoke about this and some tips with my new friend Alyssa from Gold Coast Doulas. And I hope you guys were able to watch that interview the other day, because we were talking about, things like finding that balance between working and when you're staying home, right? And how, look, if you're somebody who tends to beat up on yourself, if you're somebody who's like tends to be hard on yourself, right? First of all, I love you, because that means that you want to be somebody who's trying to be better. Okay. So if you're somebody who's hard on yourself, you're in good company. I definitely grew up that way. Um, but this can be, so just give me like a thumbs up or a heart or something if you're somebody who tends to be hard on yourself. What this time can do for people like us who can be hard on themselves is to just amp all of that stuff up, right? Like around house care, around the house is dirty, and I don't, and at the same time, I don't want to be worried about the house being dirty, but I care that my house is dirty, right? And all of this self-talk, I don't want to be missing out on time with my kids, but I still have to get other things done. Or why aren't I, doing all of the cool Pinterest things that all these other moms seem to be doing when they're online, right? All these ideas and all this creativity that moms are taking advantage of right now. I can't even clean out my own closet, right? Like, if you're somebody who takes what other people are doing and turns it back on yourself, I just want to just give you a huge hug right now. And I just want to tell you that it's time to go easy on yourself. It doesn't mean to lower your standard for how you want to behave and for what's truly important for you. But my call to action right now is for every parent to get really clear about what is essential to them, What is your essential value system? And how does that play out in your everyday? What is truly important to you? Is it truly important that you are calm and that you are as happy as possible? Yes? No? Maybe? If that is something that is truly important to you, then what the next step is, what are the things that I'm doing right now that are getting in the way of helping me be the calm and happy parent that I want to be, right? And then looking at what is the smallest step that I can take right now to eliminate something that is creating more stress for me. And I'll just share honestly with you guys that what creates more stress for me is when I find myself getting trapped into the comparison game. That is a doozy for me. When I start looking at what other people are doing and I start turning that inward, and instead of holding my ground, and being really clear about where I truly stand, I start comparing myself to somebody. And what happens when we do that is that inevitably you're not going to measure up. You're always going to be in somebody else's shadow. Why? Why? First of all, I want you to know that comparison is the thief of joy. And I want you to hold on to that. Comparison is the thief of joy. Number two, why does it happen? It happens because, especially now, but even without quarantine, but especially now, when everything is being put onto social media, it is a carefully curated version of somebody else's life. Whatever they're choosing to share, they are totally in control of what they're sharing, right? Think about it compared to real life. If you are with a friend and her child or his child is melting down and they're looking at you and they're going, "Oh, we're totally fine. Everything is great right now." You can be like, "Wait a second. This isn't really matching up here. Come on, be real." Whereas with social media, you don't have that option to be like, "Wait a second, what's really going on there?" And so the 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 pain point around comparing and why it's the thief of joy is that we end up comparing what's going on, like our whole picture. We have a vision of our whole picture, our insides, right? We're comparing what we know from our full picture to somebody else's limited sharing of what they're sharing. And I'm not saying that your friends are trying to be fake or anybody's trying to do anything consciously. It's just what happens. Anytime that you're posting something on social media, you're choosing what to share. And by choosing what to share, you're also choosing what not to share, right? So when you compare somebody else's choice of what they're sharing to your whole thing, it's an unfair comparison. And it can end up really taking away from something that you were feeling good about, or it can make you feel worse about something that you're already feeling a lack of. And I'll give you a personal example of something that happened to me when my son was born. He was probably 2 months old or something. And he was my first child. And, I didn't plan on co-sleeping with him, but he had really bad reflux and we ended up co-sleeping. And he was sleeping so much better next to me, right? And I don't pass judgment on how anybody is doing anything. I'm just sharing my story here, okay? So I'm not saying this is the way to do it. We were just sleeping so much better. I was feeling so much better. And when I shared with a friend of mine how we were sleeping and what was going on, and I said, "Oh, and he wakes up a little bit and then, we just sort of like he nurses, then he goes back to sleep." And I was feeling so good about it. She looked at me and she was not trying to make me feel bad, but she said, "That's actually not really good at all. Like he shouldn't be waking up that frequently. He should be going for these certain hours." And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. And she's like, "Yeah, my kids, are sleeping 4 hours a night by the time they're 2 months, whatever." She was doing a whole different thing in her house. Her kids didn't have reflux. But my point is that I was feeling really good about my situation until I compared my situation and received the way I interpreted it was judgment from her. She wasn't judging me, but I felt that I was being judged. And suddenly I was like, oh, I guess when I look at it in that light, I guess it's not that good. And I'll never forget, I left her house. I was, had my baby, and we had had some tea, and I was going home for a nap, and I was like, oh, I guess that's not going that well. Totally having like no sense of like what was true for me. And what was really true for me in that moment was that I was getting better sleep the way that I was doing it. And if I was better slept, then everybody was going to be happier. But that conversation with my friends started a whole thing around sleep in my house that became a really stressful thing. And I share that with you very honestly because it reveals a moment in time where, because I wasn't grounded in what I was doing and I wasn't feeling confident in what was true for me, I let myself be knocked off my center. And that happens all the time. Anytime that we're not feeling really grounded in what we're doing and we start inviting in, we let in other people's voices, it's like a mixed bag because you want to have information, right? But it's like the more people you let in and the more people who start chiming into your huddle, I always think of it as a huddle, the more you need to be able to weed out what doesn't make sense, what doesn't fit, what doesn't feel good, and what doesn't feel right for you. So I'm sitting here, as a parenting expert. I hate being called that, but, so quotes, right? Expert in my family. I know, most of the time what works in my family, and that's through a lot of trial and painful error, right? And years of trying and failing, trying and winning, finding all the in between stuff. There's no one right way to do it, but there is a right way for you to do it in your family in a way that's going to work beautifully for your kids and mostly beautifully for you. In my coaching group, and sometimes here I talk about charting your parenting wins. And I'm really specific about when we share wins, that the win is really going to be about when you felt like you handled something the way you wanted to handle it, separate from the outcome that you got from your child. Because the truth is, you could handle something like freaking pro, like a champ, and your child might still not do the thing that you want them to do, stop doing the thing that you want them to do, change their behavior, love you and get on, praise you for being the best mom in the world, right? And if you don't celebrate that process for you, then you're missing out on your win. If all of your wins are hinged to your child's reactions, then you're going to get into an ego battle and an ego cycle with your child. So if any of you are trying to do any kind of conscious parenting, you're in this group, you're trying to do conscious parenting, you're trying to be more aware as a parent, that's something to be looking out for. That when you have your ego attached to the outcome of what's happening, that you're going to be locked in a cycle and you're going to take your child's behavior as either a pat on the back or a slap on the wrist. And I want to encourage you to stand in your truth no matter what your child does. If it works to get the behavior that you want, wonderful. Then that happened to get that outcome. But if what you did felt right for you and felt good for you and you didn't get the outcome, okay. It doesn't mean that you don't try that action again. It doesn't mean you're a bad parent. It doesn't mean that you had, that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean anything, really. It means that it didn't work in that moment. Maybe you needed a different approach. Maybe you needed the timing to be different. Maybe your child wasn't receptive to it. So I'm talking about a lot of things here. I just wanted to get in here with you guys today and share some ideas around how to stay aligned with yourself, how to not compare, and why we tend to compare with other people and what happens when we compare with other people, and how to chart your own parenting win in a way that divests yourself from the actual outcome of your child's behavior. Does that mean that you give up and you let your child run wild, while you're over here, being Zen mama? No, it doesn't. It means you need to lean in and, guide them toward behavior that is more acceptable and deal with it. You can't zen your way through parenting without interacting with your child, right? It's not like mom off in the corner meditating and, the kids running crazy and ransacking the house. That's not an option for me anyway. It's not what I teach. Um, but it's really important to stay aligned with what is true for you so that you know that you are charting a course for success. And the tactics are going to change over time, but the overall strategy is not. So keep an eye out for when that happens. When you feel like you do something, your child doesn't give you the outcome that you were hoping for, check yourself. Check yourself. What was I expecting? Was I expecting too much? Was it an unfair expectation? Do I need to drop the expectation and just try something new next time? What happens when I go in with a clean slate and I don't have an expectation? Does that change the energy around my interaction with my child? How does all of that play out? These are all just reflective, self-reflective questions constantly to be looking back, not to punish yourself, not to use as a hair shirt or a whip, on yourself. None of that. Just to have self-awareness every time that we're interacting with our kids, with our partners if we've got one of those, with our in-laws if they're a part of us, our inner circle, our families, ourselves. Just awareness. The first step is always going to be awareness. What is going on? Is it working? Is it not working? When does it work? When does it work? Doesn't it work? Can I establish a pattern? What do I need to change it? Does it need to be changed at all? Any of those for inquiry questions that we can get more clarity about, any of those, that process will help us to get more and more on a path that feels really, really good to us. And it doesn't have to be in comparison to anybody else. This is the path for walking your beautiful parenting journey. Does that make sense? All right, I see some comments here. Great. So I've got Julia, hi, and Cindy. It's hard trying to put everything away and spending time with your little ones. Absolutely. Yep. I hear you. Ooh. Okay. And Cindy, you asked me, is it the same when others compare you to other moms? Yeah. So here's the funny thing is that this is the seed of judgment. This is why other people will judge you. You ready to hear a truth bomb? So when other people are not feeling confident in what they're doing, they are going to judge you for what you're doing if you're not doing it the exact same way that they are. So anytime that you are feeling judged by somebody else, which is often in parenting, like all the time, somebody's giving somebody side eye. Somebody's being like, I wouldn't handle it like that. Somebody is saying, well, my kids wouldn't do that. Or I wouldn't, or how does she, good or bad judgment. Says more about that person who's doing the judging than the person they're actually judging. Because the truth is, and you know this, that any time that you have felt truly confident about where you stand on something, what somebody else says or does, it just doesn't matter. You don't get upset about it. You don't have a story around it. You're not like, oh, I'm jealous of that, or, oh, I don't want that at all, or they suck, or they're so much better than I am, right? There's no energy around it. You're just like, oh, okay, that's what they're doing, right? Think of an example when something that you feel so sure about. You've done your research, you've done your homework, you've done your experimenting, and this is what works for you. Whatever that thing is, whether it's how you put the toilet paper on your roll. Do you have the flap coming in the front or you have it coming in the back, right? How do you brush your teeth? When do you brush your teeth? Before breakfast or after breakfast? These are the little questions that we all go through, right? How do you fold your underwear, right? Once you establish your way of doing something that actually really works for you, I'm giving you little silly examples to make a point here. Because when you go to somebody else's house, and you notice that they put the toilet paper roll on differently than how you do you get triggered by that? Do you notice it? Are you like, oh, this is really stupid? Okay, this is just how they do it. Or do you secretly turn it around, right? If you have any kind of judgment around it yourself, there's something going on for you there. It says more about you than it does about the other person. Does that make sense? So the same thing applies. Anytime somebody's judging you, right? It means that it says more about them and that they're not really centered in where they are because they feel a need to weigh in. They feel a need to give their position as a defense because they're feeling defensive. Just by witnessing you doing it differently, they're feeling defensive. Now, a bigger example is when, that's my daughter, bless you, sweetie. Bigger example is when somebody who matters to you, let's just say this is classic, right? This is not true, happens to be not true in my family, but I'll just say classic is the mother-in-law coming over, or your own mother, judging what you're doing in your house, whether it's how you put away your utensils or it's how you're diapering your baby, or, and there's judgment there because you're doing it differently, right? And their reaction is, wasn't I good enough? Isn't the way I do it not good enough for you? They're not so settled in how they're doing it and not so clear, not so confident in how they're doing it, that they take a way of doing it differently as a judgment against them. Do you see how that works? So anytime you're feeling that, that's just truth. That's a red flag for you, or not a red flag, but an indicator flag saying, oh, I'm not feeling so confident about this. That's why I'm being judgy about somebody else. And so doesn't that make sense when you think about all the mom judgment out there, all the parenting blame, how insecure all of us feel, how vulnerable we feel as parents, that when we see somebody else doing it differently, a lot of the time, maybe for some of us most of the time, maybe for some of you all of the time, you're like, wait, they're doing it differently. We went through this question came up, how do you diaper, right? And I came out of it on this side of the equation, but they came out of it on this other side of the equation. And I actually respect this person. Uh-oh, maybe I'm doing it wrong. Uh-oh, okay, but I don't want to go there. So I'm just going to, hold my stance even stronger. And I'm going to judge that other person for what she decided, right? She's a bad mom. She's using cloth diapers, or she's a bad mom. She's using disposable diapers, or she's a bad mom. She's using whatever, right? Because that's how, when we're feeling insecure, that's how we make ourselves feel better. That's just truth. And the true hallmark of confidence is when we're okay, we're aligned with what we've chosen, and we have the flexibility to say, well, maybe that is somebody who I respect, and I do want to see how she's diapering. Maybe she does have a better idea than I do. Isn't that such a better way of being open to things and of growing and of changing? And I'm saying with the diaper example because it's small and there's nothing emotional about it, right? It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a moral issue how you diaper your child. So, and for everyone who's like a hardcore cloth diaper out there, I know the environment. I feel you, and I am an environmental lover myself. But to judge other people based on decisions that they make around this is, that's just doesn't do anybody any good. It actually does the opposite. So 2 things here. Pay attention to when you're feeling judged by somebody else. It says more about them than it does about you. And when you're judging somebody else, just notice, what am I feeling insecure about? What am I not feeling so great about here? What work do I need to do here? Does that make sense? Okay, I got some comments here. Julia says, it gets stressful to make someone feel comfortable while I feel uncomfortable that my kids aren't getting their needs met. Yes, absolutely. You are your child's advocate. And you can't make anybody feel anything, right? It just happens. Yep. It's not your job to make somebody else feel something else. The only job you have, the number one job you have, is to make yourself feel calm and grounded and take action from there. And how other people feel is their responsibility, right? And this is breaking the cycle of codependence. And codependence is really for those of us, I'm raising my hand here, who were brought up in some sort of dysfunction in our first family. The belief that as children, growing up believing that our involvement would make things change. Our involvement would affect other people's feelings. Our involvement could fix things, right? We grow up believing that our dependence, that our involvement, and other people's dependence on us is our value, that our family needs us to function in a certain way, that we need, therefore, other people in order for us to be whole. And yes, we need people, but we don't need them all the time. For people who grew up in a dysfunctional home, there are just other, holes that need to be filled. And it's hard to distance ourselves from all of that dysfunction. It's really important to do it so we don't pass it on to our kids. All right. All right, my friends, that is it for today. Cindy says you've stopped caring what others think and you just make sure that your kids are okay. Yep. So that's awesome. Your job is to make sure you're okay and first, so that you can be in a place to make sure that you can make sure your kids are okay. And yes, when they are young, it is our job to make sure that they are around people who are nurturing, who are not giving them toxic messages, to remove them from places that we don't want them to be exposed to, all of that. We wouldn't let them just sit in a room with, people smoking cigarettes all the time, right? And absorbing people's secondhand smoke. Why would we let them sit in a room with people who are going to be giving them damaging messages? Same thing, right? So yes, it is our job to protect them and to make sure that they're in emotionally healthy environments. Totally. Yeah, and I don't mess around with that stuff at all. That's our job. Okay. I hope this helped you today. If just as a reminder, I'm finishing up my book. I am setting up a separate side group for the Yelling Cure, which is going to be starting up hopefully in a couple of weeks. I keep saying a couple of weeks, and it's, the book process is a little bit longer than I anticipated. It's taking longer to get through editing, so I was a little naively optimistic. But we're going to be building that tribe in a separate group and doing some coaching together. So I hope to see you there if that's something that you struggle with, something that you want to be a part of. I would love to have you aboard. Please send me a message, a PM, or an email, and let me know that you're interested. And I'd love to have you dive in and join me for this. I'm calling it a course in the making. We're going to be creating it together, and I'm going to be supporting you every step of the way. All right, my dears, thank you for joining me today, and I will see you next time. Mwah. Stay mighty. Bye.